Hello and welcome to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed Org3D podcast, where we talk about growing tech startups with those who have grown them. Today I'm joined by Rick Hall. He's a founder, CEO, and advisor of data analytics companies and has been in this space for over 30 years. Rick, it's a pleasure to have you on the pod today. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, Ben, and thank you very much for having us.
No worries at all. Thanks for being here. So sort of to kick things off then, Rick, for the benefit of our listeners, do you want to start by telling us a bit about who you are, what your mission is, and the work that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So, as you indicated, I've been in the space a long time. I started getting involved in analytics pretty much right out of college, working for a software consulting firm, and, kind of went from there to founding a couple different companies in the analytics space. The first one out to build a kind of a generalized analytic platform ended up focusing very much on a sector, the consumer goods sector. And we got kind of interested in how we embed models in a selling process for consumer goods and retail companies, and did a lot of work kind of modeling price and promotion and seeing how that worked. And that was kind of a great piece of business. Sold that company to Nielsen in 2012, ran their global sales analytics practice and built a bunch of more aggressive models there. And then I went on to be a CTO for a retail services company before starting a new company called Karen Corporation and buying a company called Aginity, which is where I am now. And, kind of for me, throughout the process, it's really been about this kind of intersection between business and technology, and how does analytics really kind of serve the business. That's always been kind of my passion and interest. And, analytics are really important to decision making across all industries today. It's kind of a fun place to be because there's so much new horsepower and a lot of new stuff out there. But, not always companies have been successful deploying that. So we're really about how do you kind of get the last mile to business teams to be successful.
Perfect. Fantastic. That's a great overview. Thank you. So yeah, you mentioned there you acquired Aginity. I believe that was in the kind of springtime of 2020.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through what kind of considerations and factors and thought process there is behind making that kind of decision to acquire a company?
Yeah. So, kind of everything in running a business from my perspective starts with kind of what's your vision. So you have to have clearly a vision, and that vision should be connected to some higher value you're going to deliver, and who you're going to deliver it for. Kind of what's your audience and what's your value. And kind of I think a lot of people think about business in a different way, but I think if you start with value for a set of users, then that's a great place. Then secondly, for me particularly, and I think this is generally important, is what's an area that you really know about, right? So you don't want to go start a business in an area that you have no knowledge of. I mean, some people do, but I think that startups are much more successful if they're in an area that you know about. So I've kind of been in the analytics space for a long time. I kind of saw a series of problems around this kind of last mile of how analytics actually get implemented. I've been very interested in that for some time and seen what worked and what didn't work. And that's what our mission was at Karen when we founded the company. And I got introduced to Aginity through who'd been the president of Nielsen when I was there. He introduced me to Aginity. I saw what they were doing, and I saw they were very much in the kind of same space, and that there was a big opportunity to take the technology they built and utilize it in this area that we were focused on. So our focus met their capabilities. So, and to me, that's kind of the starting point of any, it's not so much an opportunistic thing as I got a vision, and these guys fit that vision. They're doing some really cool things, and we think we can help that, kind of progress. So you ultimately want, kind of 1 and 1 to equal 3. So if your company and the other company you're acquiring come together and it's a better than either by themselves, then you're off to a good start. And I think that really was true with Aginity, and it's gone very well. And we have a great team. The team is combined from the group that founded Karen and the Aginity team. Nobody thinks of themselves as from one side or the other at this stage of the game, and we've managed to do really well. And that kind of gets into the cultural and values aspect, which kind of is the third thing, right? So you got a vision, that makes sense. It's in an area that you really understand. Is the culture and the visions going to be a fit? That's third. And then lastly, of course, is there a value financially that you can agree to? And all those things came to work for purchasing Aginity. And so we did so and closed the deal on March 10th of last year.
Fantastic. And yeah, just on that sort of cultural side then, has there been a big push to sort of make the culture your own and impact that, or was that already existing and that's part of why you've gone with this company in particular?
Yeah, so it has to be both, right? If your values as a leader and how you want to run the business don't align with the values of the company that you're acquiring, then you probably shouldn't make the move, right? And Aginity was very customer focused. A lot of customers who really like their product, I think we had a very similar attitude in the conversations. When we were looking at the deal, those things aligned, and so kind of off we went. It's been an interesting journey because we did that deal on March 10th, and if you think about last year and all the lockdowns around COVID, et cetera, the entire company runs in a virtual world where everybody is meeting on kind of Zoom and in the kind of Teams and other things, and that's actually worked surprisingly well, right? So kind of you have to have an alignment of values to start with. Your culture should be built around your values, kind of we've done so. Now, I have a series of perspectives on what a team should do, and I've kind of written and shared those, and so I was able to line that up from the beginning. Everybody kind of understands that what they're how they fit in and what the organization works like, and it's worked out for us.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, interesting that kind of it's worked fairly well, the kind of virtual habitat that we find ourselves in now. So in terms of your startup career, I know you've been in the startup world a long time, and as you kind of mentioned already, you've taken a couple of those companies to successful sale. What is involved in that kind of journey, and what have you learned, and how do you take that into the decisions that you are making today?
So the first thing is, kind of what I started with. You got to have a vision that you're out to support, right? That's number one. And you got to know who you're supporting. Now, then second, then if you know your vision, who you're supporting, then you've got to have a clear understanding that you're going to be able to kind of iterate, right? So I think that, kind of my first time out, we had a vision. We really kind of stuck to it for a long time. We did eventually make a couple of pivots. But I think that there's an institutional process, a product-oriented process, which companies can follow now, where you're really very much aligned with your individual customers and you iterate based on their feedback, right? So you have a vision, you take that to your customers around their value. You might find that there are nuances to their needs, which you have to adapt to, right? So very few companies start out with they got it all figured out, and what they actually implement and build is exactly what they originally intended, and customers buy in droves, right? Yet there are a few of those companies, right? But they're the exception, not the rule, right? So then the other thing I would just say related to that is, you've got to be willing to stick it out when there are hard times, right? So if you're going to start a company, you're going to be in an early stage company, you got to have a thick skin. You got to be willing to take a risk, right? Because the world is going to change, and if you're not prepared to adapt to that and take the risk associated with that, then probably you shouldn't be in the early stage company space, right? And you got to look yourself. You got to look in the mirror and you got to say, this is where I want to spend my time. I'm willing to take these risks. In fact, I'm so passionate about it. I kind of have to do this. This is really what I want to do. This is what I feel like I've put on this earth to do. If that's how you feel, then you're in the right space. But it's not for the faint of heart. Uh, and it's not just a path to making a lot of money. In fact, I think making money is a measure of your contribution value. It's not like you go into it to make money and you deliver value to make money. Go into it to deliver value, and the financials will be the consequence of delivering value.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at it. Kind of money as a measure of your effort and your value that you add. In terms of then the kind of how you create that value, I want to talk about the kind of sales side of things for a second here. Obviously, with something like software or technology, innovation and change are at the very core of the industry. And I'm interested, do you think that the skills needed to sell things like software are also constantly changing alongside it? Or do you think that the core skills that have always been a part of sales are still the most important now?
So I think that the core skills of sales, which is kind of like human interaction, and relationships, and being able to kind of understand the customer's needs and meet them, are the same. There's lots of like different sales techniques that have evolved over the years, and kind of you can believe in one model or another. But the essence of it is, I understand your problem, you trust me, and I have a solution that's going to solve your problem and create value for you, and you're going to give me a shot. Now, what has changed in a massive way is how we sell software. So, kind of in the early stages of business to business software, we sold at the enterprise level. So we'd go to the chief technology officer or the head of sales, and we'd sell them a big vision. And it was a long sales cycle based on a vision, and they would eventually trial it out and try to drive it down in the organization. Today, we follow kind of a land and expand model with a free trial. So, we get users to use our product in a very low risk way and create value for them. And only after we've created value for them do we start a sales process. And our initial sales process, most of the time, and we kind of prefer it this way, is for a small number of seats, right, for our least expensive product. So, we start with, we're gonna give you something, try it out if you like it, and if you do try it out and you like it, we love you to pay for it, subscribe to the basic version, and then if you like that, then buy more of it for more users, and then eventually buy a premium product. That's completely flipped on the reverse of the old way. And the old way used to believe, I have to sell the biggest person in the organization on this big vision. I want to get to the big decision maker. And a lot of software was sold that way. I sold some software that way. But a lot of software ends up on the shelf that way, right? And the beauty of this kind of trial and expand model is, if you're not creating value for the users, then you're never going to move up the ladder. And so that has really changed. I think that there's a huge focus in the industry now that didn't exist 10 years ago or 20 years ago, that says, I'm going to make it as easy as possible, as friction-free as possible for you to get to try my software. If you try it and you use it, then you'll adopt it, and then I'll eventually, sell more of it to you. That's changed. But the core of selling value, people to people, that's the same.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a great point. The kind of transition from top down to bottom up. I'm keen. Kind of, do you have any ideas on what's driven that change in terms of how we're selling software now?
Sure. Well, I think a bunch of things have driven. I mean, one is that a lot of enterprise software is sat on the shelf, right? So that's a problem, right? You could probably go to Salesforce and kind of when they launched, and if you think back to the early days, in fact, their whole original campaign is we're not software. They used to have this software with an X through it, and that was their original message. And it was a very effective message because what they were really saying is we're not enterprise software sold in a traditional way. They were selling a subscription. So that was another change that I didn't exactly mention, but in the old world, we sold licenses. So you paid all of it up front, right? They were selling a subscription. They started a model, which is also a really powerful thing because it forces you to align value with the customer over time, right? If they use it and they keep using it, then they're going to keep getting value and they're going to subscribe again. So I think that you kind of have to give credit to Mark Benoit and Salesforce for really kind of bringing that model. There were other people kind of doing it, but they were really the ones who brought it to the fruition. It aligns value with people's, kind of needs over time. It makes it easier to try it before you get to a big enterprise engagement. So I think that's really the essence of it, is that you can get there quickly, your risks are less upfront, and you expand over time. It's just a better alignment between the software provider and the company on value. That's really why it's changed.
Perfect. Perfect. And in terms of, we talked about the kind of process for selling and how that's changed. In terms of building your sales teams, you've worked with countless over the years. What are some of the key things that you look for in a salesperson in particular, and how do you best qualify that before you bring them on board?
So I think with everybody, I start with, kind of values, right? So that, I have to align to that. The second is, with salespeople, you want people who are really great listeners, right? So you think selling is something where you're going out and, kind of communicating and talking and but actually selling is much more of a listening skill, actually. So it's the ability to understand customers' needs is the basis of being able to sell, in my view, right? Then I would say the next part is it takes a certain tenacity, right? So, I mean, even if you got the right values and you're really great at listening, you're going to get a lot of no's and a lot of pushback. And if you're not willing to put in the time, put in the effort to, try to find your way to contact people, then, then you're not going to be, an effective salesperson. So, for us, I think a lot of times with sales, you're hiring people either who are already experienced, so they're kind of in the process and you can kind of get them to explain how they've done it and you can kind of see that and, you match that up. Sometimes we're giving people a first shot at sales, right? And then we want them to understand our space and have some interest, and we'll start them out in a very simple kind of customer success type selling role, and then kind of grow them. For me, it's fun to grow people, it's that those are the combinations of things. I think the right kind of values, great listening skills. They got a bit of an understanding of the selling process, and they're willing to be, tenacious, and stick it out.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. So in terms of, we discussed kind of sales and startups, in terms of the industry that you've been in for this time, in terms of sort of data and analytics, I know that data is becoming more and more essential for the long-term strategy of modern companies, big and small. Can you tell me a bit about what some of the key challenges are for businesses that are trying to get the most value from their data, and how Aginity software in particular kind of helps them with that goal?
Yeah, so so data is exploding, right? And it's kind of everywhere, and there's more and more of it. And people have realized, companies have realized that, hey, if I have some analysis of my performance, past data, that's going to help me make better decisions and improve my business, right? So there's a need for analytics kind of everywhere. I actually think we're going through a really interesting transition, right? Away from these very centralized analytic programs. You might think of them as the corporate data warehouse, right?
Mm.
And in those programs, which kind of, I would put the timing on that from the 90s till, say 2015, 16. And during that time, the emphasis was on big industrial centralized systems to provide analytics. And it worked for the big process in the company. So I want to look at ROI analysis across all my sales or supply chain optimization or some finance stuff. Those processes, they're big processes, they're consistent, and these big industrial analytics have worked for them. But for what I call the last mile, which is all the variation of different business units and different teams and analytics in every area, from HR to, in hiring to, to marketing to you name it. We need analytics. We want analytics, and there's all kinds of variation out there. And business is changing all the time. And when business is changing all the time, it's very different for these big analytic programs to adopt. So the transition that we've seen and we're seeing right now is one that's kind of democratizing analytics and pushing it to the edge and letting business people or business analysts actually build some of their own stuff, and to do that in a way that collaborates with the central engineering team, because you still need that central engineering team. But I was talking to a chief technology officer, chief data officer recently. It's like, look, I got 1,000 people in my engineering organization. You think, oh, that's a big team, right? It's like, but I got 40,000 people in the business who are all trying to make decisions with analytics, and my 1,000 people can't possibly keep up with the 40,000 people, because they have 40,000 people, 40,000 different needs, actually. So what they were looking for is something that provides some self-service to the 40,000, but can leverage the work of the 1,000. And that's what we do, is we provide a tool set that allows engineers and business people to kind of collaborate on building analytics. We sit on top of these really super powerful analytic platforms, which have emerged in this new phase. So like Snowflake or Redshift or Microsoft Synapse, or something like Hive. These platforms have made massive leaps forward in terms of their capabilities. We provide an application that sits on top of them and provides this engineering and business user collaboration. And I think that's really kind of the key of where we are now, right? It's the last mile of variation in analytics and rapid change in the business, where we need to drive analytics to that layer. And we can only do that if we find a way to leverage the, kind of the end user.
Mm. And on that kind of spectrum of continuity, do you ever see a time in the future where there'll no longer be the need for the engineering role at all? Or do you think that one will drive the other and they'll both improve?
No, yeah, I mean, there are some companies who've like kind of done this self-service completely outside of the engineering world, analytic capability. And I don't really see that. I mean, maybe someday, kind of machines will think for themselves, right? But I think that the expertise in these engineering organizations is really massive. I think building these complex, multi-step, centralized systems, which people have become good at, creates a skill set which is massively valuable. And the results of those big systems is still super important. So being able to leverage that group collaborating with the business teams is where we believe the progress really needs to lie. And frankly, I think a lot of people have missed it, right? Because a lot of people have focused on one or the other. We got great engineering tools, but it doesn't really work for end users, or we got great engineering tools and they're kind of in conflict with the engineers. I think you need both, and I think they need to collaborate, and that certainly is our point of view.
Fantastic. Perfect. Well, I'm conscious of time here, Rick. Got a couple more questions. I think what would be really cool is if we could finish the pod kind of to the benefit of, if anyone out there is listening to start their kind of entrepreneurial journey today, from someone who's been on that journey and is still kind of learning every day. What's kind of, if you got a key failure from your career that comes to mind, and if that has changed the way that you approach your business moving forwards?
I think the biggest one is something I mentioned earlier, was this new productized world where we think about iteration, right? So there's a book called The Lean Startup, which I think is massively valuable, and another book called Inspired, How to Build Products Customers Love. They both talk to this process of being able to get feedback and change quickly. And I think that, if I could go back to my first round, I wish we'd had learned and adapted quicker. And so I think the ability to learn and adapt quickly is really super critical, and being able to kind of get customer feedback, realize how that impacts what you're doing, change where necessary, and adapt. It's kind of like test and learn and iterate. That's where software product development is right now. I certainly wasn't doing that, kind of early in my career. I thought I had the big idea, and it turns out actually your customers, if you can test with them, that their real needs will emerge, and that is humbling, and also really rewarding when you get it right.
Perfect. That's fantastic. One kind of very quick final question then from me is, you've mentioned a couple of good books there. Are there any people in particular that you would recommend our listeners kind of go away and follow on LinkedIn, or sort of absorb their content? Any people that come to mind, and why is that?
Sure. So, the Silicon Valley Product Group, which is behind Inspired, right? Kind of that's top of mind for me. And I would go there, and then I would just kind of look at everything linked off of there, and kind of follow them to learn this new stuff. And I would take those two books I mentioned, and there's actually a whole kind of genre that you can spin off of. I think on my LinkedIn site, there's a posting of my 10 favorite books, and it's go check that out. You might like my 10 books, you might not, but that's my point of view.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the pod, Rick. It's been some really fascinating insights from your journey. And I do recommend anyone listening go and follow Rick Hall and see the kind of fascinating stuff that they're doing over there at Aginity. Thanks for being on today, Rick.
Yeah, Ben, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Okay, well, tune in next time for Growing Tech Fast.